the master of the thriller, the professor of pacing and plot. Michael Crichton is not only a celebrated author of our time who's definitely influenced a generation of sci-fi thriller authors, but he would go on to write and direct successfully for televisions and movies. And no matter how you spin it, Michael Crichton knew narrative structure. And he knew how to, time and time again, create a story that made the reader keep coming back for more. Today, we dive into his narrative structure to see what we can learn from one of the greats. Welcome to the Writing Theory Podcast, a podcast for every level of writer. Everything that we discuss here in this podcast is about pushing you to the next level of storytelling. From prose to structure to the business of writing, you can join me here every Wednesday, not Monday, Wednesdays now, for a new episode, a new topic, and a new takeaway that you can apply to your own writing right away. I'm Carson Long. Let's get started. All right. I kind of want to get started today by going over my experience with Michael Crichton and why he's an author that is so good to learn from. Well, depending on what you want to write. Michael Crichton does a few things arguably better than any other writer, but he fails at other parts of his writing arguably more than any other writer. I know that's a confusing sentence, but what I mean by that is Michael Crichton's shortcomings are so obvious and in your face. For example, strong female characters, not really his strong suit. Avoiding tropes, especially in regards to female characters, not really his strong suit. I guess what I'm trying to say is that Michael Crichton isn't perfect, but there's still so much we can learn from him. So let's start by just establishing some baseline stuff. I've read a handful of books from Michael Crichton. I've read Jurassic Park, the sequel of Jurassic Park, The Lost World, Timeline, Andromeda Strain, Dragon Teeth, Congo, Disclosure, Micro, Sphere, and even the underrated posthumous, that doesn't sound right, the underrated Pirate Latitudes. Even writing this podcast script, I think I started to realize that I've read more standalone novels from Michael Crichton than any other single author. Look, I've read 20-something books by Jim Butcher, but those were all the Dresden Files. It was all one long series. I've read the entire Ender's Game and Ender's Shadow series. But again, those are series books. When it comes to standalone books, I think I've read more Michael Crichton than any other author, and it's not even close. And that wasn't something I consciously did. That was just an effect of finding an author that was able to get you excited about their books, and they just keep performing time and time again. They keep getting it right. So what keeps me coming back to Michael Crichton? Easy. He has interesting ideas, and he is a master of pacing. Those two simple things keep me coming back. And that's what we're looking at today to try to learn something from his writing style. How does he make these stories, what's the right word? So consumable, maybe? So easy to pick up and devour? I want to start today off with talking about the interesting way that Crichton planned and plotted his stories, because I think this is very different than a lot of the other planning, writing routines that we've seen from other authors. If you want to learn more about those, you can go back to episode 1 for writing routines of the rich and the famous, the very first episode of the podcast. So Crichton went to Harvard Medical School, and he had explored, getting a degree in English and being a professional writer before this, but he ended up going to medical school. And in that time, he wanted to support himself with his writing. And he chose to start releasing books with the pen name of John Lange, I think is maybe how you pronounce it. Now, how he would plan these books in these days were very much informed by the way that he studied for school. And I know that's going to sound kind of strange. Dorothy Cora Moore and their book, Writing Made Easy, How to Develop a Tight Plot and Memorable Characters, documents Crichton's method like this. Michael said he developed his 3-inch by 5-inch index card method of plotting out a story while going to Harvard Medical School. And he did this before writing a single word. He needed to supplement his income by writing books under a pseudonym, and this is how he did it. The cards were easy to take with him every day to class because they would fit effortlessly in a shirt pocket or a lab coat. As ideas came to him, he would just jot them down on a card. If a long sequence of dialogue or plot all came at once, he would staple these cards together. And at the end of the day, Michael would throw the cards he had used in a shoebox and replace them with a fresh batch of cards for the next day. Michael said that when the shoebox was full or nothing more came, he would take all the cards out of the box, lay them out on a large table, and rearrange his plot by shuffling the cards around into an order that he wanted to tell the story in. And once he was satisfied that he had good plot down, he would walk away and let the cards sit for a few days. He would go back to the table from time to time to reread his story's plot. He would create new cards and slip them into the layout where he wanted to set something up for later or if he needed to change something. And slowly he would let this process work. And when nothing more came that day, he would once again walk away. After several days had passed without adding any more cards, Michael would carefully pick up the entire sequence and place that stack in an index card box. Mission accomplished. He had his plotting outline. And now, whenever he had some extra time, he would sit down, pull out the first card in the box, and begin writing the story. The hard part was over, and he could be creative. His plot was tight and developed and ordered, and the story would not fail to hold a reader's attention or go off in the wrong direction. I think this is really interesting. And I want you to think about a method of more long-term planning and how you can incorporate a longer planning timeline. That's a pun. He wrote a book called Timeline. What up? Into your own writing. And while you do that, why don't we get into the actual content of the episode, what we can learn from Michael Crichton's narratives. So I've read all of these books from Michael Crichton, but I mean, while they're all good, I don't think that they are all the same level of good. So I sort of opened up the Wikipedia page for a couple different books that I really liked, and I try to sort of jostle the memory. What do I remember about these stories? What are some things they have in common? I've thought about this before. I wasn't starting from scratch, because there are some similarities in a lot of different Michael Crichton stories. And after looking across these different stories, here is what I settled on. First and foremost, every Michael Crichton story, and what makes them so easy to devour, is the inciting incident. Whether it's a scientific breakthrough, something strange that's happened, or a discovery somewhere that makes everything in the world different, something about the inciting incident, something that happens, it happens almost immediately. There are very few Michael Crichton stories that spend an exorbitant amount of time setting up a background of information. It's almost always this thing has happened, the plot is in motion, the story has started right away. And if that's the single thing you take away from this, it's going to be the importance of having a strong start to your novel. And in Michael Crichton's case, that strong start is getting to the inciting incident as quickly as possible. From that point on, the classic thing that Crichton does is finding new and interesting ways to escalate the tension, right? Jurassic Park, great example. We'll be talking about it more. Having this entire park of dinosaurs and things slowly start to go wrong and the dinosaurs start escaping. That's escalating tension. Almost every Michael Crichton book also has multiple narratives. And on top of that, these multiple narratives are almost always told from knowledgeable scientific personnel. Now, I don't think this is a core part of his narrative structure, but it is something I've latched onto as a very common Michael Crichton thing. And I think the book Sphere, one of my all-time favorites by him, is a perfect example of this. Every single one of his books is all about something crazy has happened. Get the response team together. Get the scientist that everyone kind of hates because they think he's crazy. Get him here because he's going to be part of our plan to solve everything. This is a very common Michael Crichton thing. Gathering the experts. Every character that's involved has a specialty. And in the case here, what I'm talking about is a lot of times we get perspectives from a couple different characters in that story. Next, we have almost always some kind of ticking clock, some kind of reason that things need to be done with urgency. And it may be, if we don't do this quick enough, people are going to die. It may be that if we don't do this thing quick enough, we're going to lose our opportunity to save our own lives, to save the day. It may be that if we don't act urgently, we're going to lose a legal case. But whatever the reason is, in whatever Michael Crichton story you pick up, there is always 100% a reason to be urgent, a ticking clock that means you have to act quickly. And the closer you get to that final ticking of the clock, the more exciting that tension gets. And lastly, and I think this is what most people think of with Michael Crichton, every book sort of is inspired by some sort of science or technology. But that being said, the stories are all very much about the human characters, the human experience, people who are greedy or people who are in love or people who are acting out of anger or passion or hate, whatever that case may be. While the story is framed around this technology and is typically explained in some simple way to the reader so they understand what's going on, it's still a story about people. And we've talked about this before on the YouTube channel. Every story is a human story. It's about human experiences, and that extends to Michael Crichton. So using these sort of 5 key elements, an inciting incident, tension that's going to, of course, escalate, multiple perspectives, a ticking clock, and, of course, some core central theme. We can actually look at some different books here and see exactly how these different stories use that. No spoilers here, by the way. Let's start by looking at one of Crichton's more popular books, The Andromeda Strain, right? How does the Andromeda Strain follow these 5 things? The Andromeda Strain, the inciting incident, a deadly extraterrestrial disease, microorganism, biological thing wipes out a town of people and leads to a top secret government investigation. That's the Andromeda Strain. And of course, tension is escalated because the scientists are trying to understand whatever this new microorganism pathogen is before it continues to wipe out more people. We get a team of scientific experts and we get information from each person's perspective. And eventually, things start to go wrong. The strain starts to get out. The ticking clock has begun counting down. And everything in this book is framed through this theme of, can we control nature? Are we in danger from things we can't understand? And that's something you're probably going to see again. Jurassic Park, similar idea. We all know this story. Inciting incident. A billionaire has brought together a dinosaur zoo on an island, basically. Tension starts to escalate when things start going wrong. Animals are getting out of their cages, hunting people down. We get perspectives between scientists and the businessmen and even kids. There's a ticking clock because the dinosaurs are now hunting the humans. And of course, the whole theme, genetic manipulation, unpredictability of nature, life finds a way, right? Congo, another one of these stories that I really liked. It's so hard. Sphere might be my number one favorite Michael Crichton story, and I think Congo is number 2. But I also feel like Congo is one of these stories where maybe not everyone's heard about it. Congo is about a monkey and a monkey specialist, something like that. There is a expedition out in the Congo searching for a lost city in this Congo jungle, and it goes missing. Tensions escalate as animals start acting unpredictably around the entire world, and our monkey expert specialist needs to go to the Congo to try to help figure out what's happened. And so we're traveling through the jungle. Things are going crazy. We get multiple perspectives. We get businessmen. We get scientists. We get adventurers, and everyone has these different agendas. Some people want to find the lost city for the fame and the fortune. The company is seeing all of this as a way that they can make more money, even at the expense of nature and other people. There's a ticking clock because the longer they stay in the jungle, the more dangerous it gets. And of course, the theme with everything here, man versus nature, exploiting nature with technology and how it can harm nature. Classic Michael Crichton. Sphere, number one favorite one. Inciting incident, a mysterious alien ship found deep in the ocean. A scientific team sent off down to go check it out. Escalating tension. The team can't escape from the bottom of the ocean because of a massive storm. And also, there's some crazy stuff happening with this sphere. Who could have seen this coming? Multiple perspectives. Each different crew is going through this different psychological break. Ticking clock. The team needs to uncover whatever this sphere is about before it drives them to destruction. And then of the theme of the whole thing, the power and the dangers of human ambition. I read this whole book in one day. And it's like a 300-something page book. I was so engrossed by it. I think I read it until like 3-something in the morning. So good. And then Timeline. One of these Michael Crichton books that's a little bit more campy. Not his best one, to be honest. This one is about going back in time to medieval times. Inciting incident. A technology firm has perfected time travel, and they send a research team back into France, medieval times. Escalating tension. How do we get back to our own timeline? Things are going wrong. People are starting to die. Multiple perspectives. We get perspectives from the people who were in the past in medieval France, and we also get perspectives of people in the current day as things are going wrong differently in each location, leading to questions whether or not these people can make it back. Ticking clock. If the team doesn't return in a set amount of time, then they're stranded in the past. Of course, there's a ticking clock. The book's called Timeline. And then the whole theme is about what happens if you change history. Is technology getting too powerful? Classic Michael Crichton stuff. If you've read any of these books, or if you have other favorite books by Michael Crichton, I'd like you to give it a shot. How can you break that book down using the same sort of 5 steps? The inciting incident, the multiple perspectives, the tension, the ticking clock. You can probably break any one of his books down into these same sort of steps because it is so omnipresent with Michael Crichton. So how do we use these in our own writing, and why would we? Or why would we not? Let's start with the very first element of this, that inciting incident. This is what I think is the most important takeaway that you can learn from Michael Crichton. And it's worth saying, I think this is fairly universal. I think that you will only be benefited by creating a story with a really compelling inciting incident, regardless of your genre, regardless of what kind of story you're trying to tell, because this lets you get directly to the action and it helps the reader get invested in your story. Almost all of Michael Crichton's stories begin with something happening. Something core to the plot, something that kicks off every single event, whether it's a deadly virus, whether it's a dinosaur zoo, time travel, whatever the case is, things are already in motion. And I bring this up because specifically, I love writing fantasy. And if I were to tell you what plot frameworks are predominantly used in fantasy, it's going to be things like the hero's journey, which has an entire section of the hero's journey set up for establishing the life of the protagonist and creating at least a percentage of your story all around what life is like for this character. And this is done so that we can see that life be changed. We can see the trials and tribulations that the character goes through. And by the end of the story, we can see everything that has changed and how it sort of reflects where we started. This is the classic hero's journey, the circular style of plot framework. And I think that is also one of the things most fantasy writers get wrong, is spending too much time on this introduction. You know what? Maybe you're Tad Williams. Maybe you can afford to spend 200 something pages documenting the life of Simon Mooncalf in the Dragonbone Chair, the first book of Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. Maybe you can afford that. And maybe readers will trust that you're going to do it well. But as a new author, you have to earn that trust. Consider the importance of the strong start and having things already be in motion. There's sort of a common sentiment when it comes to writing short stories, which is start the story as late as you possibly can. And this is advice given almost solely because in a short story, you as the author are still wanting to build that foundation of knowledge before things get going. And this advice here, start with that compelling inciting incident, start with things already happening, is meant to avoid the same sort of pitfalls. Get us to the good stuff. Don't bore us. Say it with me. Get to the chorus. That's what they say in songwriting. Michael Crichton often uses multiple perspectives. And the important thing I want to point out here is it's not because Michael Crichton is creating a bunch of interesting characters with depth. I think character work is one of Michael Crichton's worst narrative elements. I don't think he creates good characters. I think he has interesting ideas. I think he writes a great plot. I think he writes pretty bad characters. So what's the importance of using multiple perspectives? It's not the fact that he is creating good characters. It's the fact that he uses multiple perspectives to give the readers information where the reader now knows this, but maybe a different character in the story doesn't know this. That element of the reader knowing more than the character creates a tension that the reader is involved in. That's great. There are some great mystery books that do this same sort of thing too. And while you don't need to do this with multiple perspectives, it's a lot harder to do if you're only telling the story from one single character, because how does the reader get that information while that one single character doesn't? You know what I'm saying? Another classic Michael Crichton thing is his exposition. Maybe one of the stronger parts of how he writes, because so many of his books are all about, here's this crazy technology. Wow, a zoo of dinosaurs. Well, I guess I have to explain how this happened. All of the technical detail you get about what's happened in Michael Crichton's books stays pretty accessible. And that's likely his background of both understanding how to write, but then also being so curious about technology. People who typically tend to be almost like teachers in a sense are really good at this kind of thing. Michael Crichton is without a doubt a believer in the 2,000 word chapter. In my old chapter video that I did on YouTube, where I broke down how long a chapter should be, when should you break from one chapter into another, and why, I looked at one of his early books, and I just opened it up to chapter 8 and 9 to count how many words was in there. And I think his chapters, I think one chapter was at 1,700 words, and the other one was at roughly 2,000. He is a believer in the short, digestible chapter. And that's because when it comes to writing plot-driven stories, that is your secret weapon to keeping the reader moving through your story. Key point here. Now, that doesn't mean you need to have short chapters. If your goal isn't to write a plot-driven story, if you're more focused on exploring the world, if you're more focused on character work, short chapters may not benefit you at all. But if you are writing for that bestseller formula, if you are writing for that general audience, then you do want to keep your chapters on average fairly short. And that's what Michael Crichton does. This also kind of helps you approach the editing advice of killing your darlings, of editing things down. It makes you streamline your story. All right, let's talk about the ticking clock. This is a big one. One of the plot difficulties that I face when I'm planning my story is making sure that tensions are always rising. And one of the best ways to do that is to have some reason why things need to be done now. Why can't the character just wait a little bit longer until things are safer? And then they can go save the day. Of course, we need some sort of urgency. Now, when you're planning out your story, one of the great things you can do, especially in the middle 50% of your story, is to create about 3 moments of escalation, 3 core events that need to happen, and every single one of these things raises the stakes and gives a reason why your character can't just walk away. If you're able to do it even better, then these moments of escalation also paint the consequences of failure in a different light. Integrating some sort of urgency and ticking clock in your middle 50% of your book is a fantastic way to add stakes to your story where your reader knows this needs to happen now. And our last and final point here, all of this idea of the theme of Michael Crichton stories being so focused on technology, but also the human relationship between technology and nature and space. This is always something that's framing his stories. And I think, and this is purely speculation, one of the great things about his stories is that when you read them, you are forced to think a little bit more consciously about them, even just for a second, these themes. You may not agree with them. You may read Jurassic Park and be like, this is all about climate change. And be like, I hate this book. I heard that from some people when I told them I was reading Jurassic Park. They said, oh, that book's just about climate change. And I was like, what are you talking about? It's about dinosaurs. Am I wrong? They can be both. They can be both. But I think because these themes are found in these books, there's always just a little bit extra to the books, a little bit of our world that is twisted in these books that makes you want to think about those ideas. These are probably great book club books. I'm sure they were back in the 70s and 80s and 90s. Maybe not so much anymore. Who knows? Who knows? One of the downsides of these books is that some of them haven't aged super well because Michael Crichton liked to write about these emerging technologies in such an interesting way. Well, we've left a lot of those technologies in the past. And now when Michael Crichton's like, what about the radiation from cellular phones? We're like, all right, dude, you missed on that one. That's okay. That's okay. You still got a pretty good track record. Do I think that this means you have to have some kind of theme as the backbone of your story? I don't. A lot of people will tell you, and even when I did my very first videos on YouTube, I had people come into my comments and be like, theme is the most important thing in your story. And I was on video being like, characters and setting and plot are so important. And for a while, I was like, man, am I missing something? I didn't think that the theme was that important. Of course, in school, they told me that. And that was mostly because we were analyzing Tolstoy or James Joyce, and the whole idea was like, this represents classes at the time. And I was like, I just want to read about Ender's Game. And so when it comes to theme, my current understanding, and I think I had it right back then, after reading a bunch of different writing books and having other writers comment that theme is like an element of your book, but the story comes first, I still believe character, setting, and plot are the three pillars of your story. And enforcing some sort of theme after all of that, that is a good best practice. The way that Stephen King says it is, after you write your story, try to figure out what the theme is, and then in your editing process, reinforce those parts and cut out things that go against that theme. You've discovered the theme of your story. You haven't written a story to the theme, if that makes sense. What are your thoughts on that? I think theme is cool, but if the story sucks, I don't care about the theme, if you know what I mean. Is that a bad outlook? You tell me. So look, Michael Crichton is an author we can learn a lot from. He's not perfect. He is not the only single author you should study, but there are some things that he does that make his stories unforgettable. Jurassic Park will be a cultural staple of our world forever because his story was so good, because the movie was so great, because it came around at the perfect time. That's just what happens. And hopefully, by at least thinking about the techniques that Michael Crichton uses, you might be able to apply some of those strategically to your own writing. Not all of them. You shouldn't take every single piece of advice here as law. But I think what makes Michael Crichton's stories so great, the fast pacing, the interesting ideas, the ticking time clock, those are things that you can now have in your writing toolbox, ready to go at a moment's notice when you need it. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, to the channel on YouTube, and let me know, what is your favorite Michael Crichton novel? It better be Sphere, and it better not be Disclosure, or I'm going to have to ask you to leave the room. Make sure to rate this podcast on whatever platform you're listening to, and feel free to come over and join the Discord, where we have 500 writers providing tips and resources, and we're doing writing contests and writing challenges and all of this crazy stuff, and it's so much fun, and I want you to be there and be excited about writing. That's all I have for you today. Again, my name's Carson Long, and I'll see you next Wednesday.